The Thabo Mbeki Foundation has confirmed that its patron will not attend this Friday's first national dialogue, in line with the decision by the other legacy groups to withdraw from the process. In a scathing letter written to the organizers of the event, Chairperson Geraldine Fraser-Moleketi says they were only invited on Monday to attend, despite having written a letter to them 2 days prior. This flies in the face of what President Cyril Ramaphosa told the media last Friday, that Mbeki was invited in his personal capacity. The letter also says it is not clear what the forthcoming meeting at UNISA is intended to achieve. Mbeki's foundation also believes the only legitimate body mandated to call a national convention is the preparatory task team, which has been operational for the past 13 months. The letter also slated the description of this Friday's event as the formal kick-off of an inclusive, citizen-led process that supposed to chart a shared vision for South Africa as an unethical effort to mislead the country. For more on this, we're joined by Newzroom Africa's senior politics reporter, Ziyanda Ngcobo. Quite a strongly worded letter, I must say. Juicy in parts.
Very juicy in parts. It's got italics, it's got bold, it's got underlines, and it's very clear in its unequivocal message. The letter sent by Geraldine Fraser-Moleketi, the chairperson of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, to Mr. Makuku Mampuru, who's representing NEDLAC on that convention organizing committee, which was put together after the Legacy Foundations announced that they no longer form part, at least in the first national convention. This letter says that in the first instance, you can't claim that this is a first national convention. Who are you to actually call such a gathering when only the preparatory task team that has been dealing with this for 13 months is mandated to do so? I want to pull out a few quotes. At the very onset of the letter, it says, "We hereby acknowledge receipt of an unsigned document from people who call themselves the National Dialogue Team, writing on behalf of a convention organizing committee, asking for Mbeki to attend." And they say the PTT, I'm running through it, has not convened the forthcoming 15-16 August gathering, and this is not the first national convention of the National Dialogue.
And we'll have nothing to do with it.
And we'll have nothing to do with it. Both the foundations and our patron, Thabo Mbeki, who, by the way, is the Chancellor of UNISA, so he won't be there. In fact, UNISA was asked this question on Monday about Mbeki's attendance because he's technically the #1 citizen of that institution, and they said, well, we're just providing, the venue for this event. But there's lots to be said here, Davi. Political parties have pulled out. Action SA says they're only sending an observing team. DA was the first to do so, interestingly, which led Mbeki to write a letter about the DA, and they've now subsequently done the same. Freedom Front Plus, so 2 GNU parties withdrawing from this process. And it's important to note about the legitimacy of processes like this, being able to rally people even behind the scenes. There is something to be said about the lobby groups representing the Afrikaner community pulling out, Freedom Front Plus, AfriForum, Solidarity. So who are we going to be talking to there? Where are these delegates coming from? And this already, if you're saying you're kickstarting something that already is shrouded with such questions on funding and credibility, many would argue that it's a nonsense. In fact, this letter says it's a non-starter.
Very interesting indeed. Of course, I mean, the presidency is adamant that this is going to go ahead, come what may. We've been promised that in the next hour and 20 minutes or thereabout, the spokesperson and advisor to the president will, in fact, once again assure South Africans that this initiative is indeed going ahead. Have we heard from other people as to what the impact, those perhaps who may be outside looking in, keen to see this thing actually happening, but of course taken aback by these developments, what they have to say that can still be done even at this late stage.
I mean, by and large, especially from the Eminent Persons Group, you know, Professor Nomboniso Gaza was on the channel yesterday, the co-chair, Rolf Meyer, they were on the channel. They were saying, well, this is not even supposed to be a process that has a center, so to speak. It needs to be handed over to South Africans, and it was in that vein that they needed to proceed. In fact, that's what the president, so this letter, in a way, flies in the face of what the president said, in the sense that last Friday, the president said, well, invitations have already gone out and there's 750 civil society groups and the like that have been invited. But this letter is basically saying that we only got the invitation on Monday. And what do you want us to do with this letter? Because in any case, we had written to you before prior and 2 days prior, and you hadn't even responded to that. But to go back to your question about those who want to see this going ahead, they're fully aware that you know, not having parties like the MK not participating, Nomboniso Gaza saying, well, everybody should be part of this because they represent a particular constituency. However, in order to maintain, you know, the whole thing of it being a citizen-led process, let this Friday and Saturday at least go ahead, and then when the dialogues are rolled out throughout the country, over 13,000 we believe are supposed to be rolled out across the country. 4,300 wards are what they're targeting, and 3 dialogues per ward is what they are targeting. Let the process begin, and it will morph itself as South Africans begin to speak. But the question then still remains, as the Appropriations Committee Chairperson, Dr. Musi Maimane, asked, where is the funding coming from? And if it's coming from the fiscus, what then is going to have to be you know, traded off in order to be able to fund this? The organizers say it's 60-40 weighting, 60% the government, 40% private sector and donations in kind. But these are all the details that everyone is still asking questions about. I mean, for an example, on Monday at the briefing, the initial amounts touted for the next 2 days was 8 million. And then you hear another person speaking say, well, it's going to be 20 million. And then you hear another figure of 25 million. And that on its own is raising a credibility issue, remembering that national dialogues emanate from a post-war or post-crisis kind of situation. So the question remains, what is the rush if it's not going to be done properly?
I'm wondering whether it's things that were left too late, or people simply couldn't find one another until now we're very close to dates that were set, and clearly that couldn't be moved, certainly on the account of none other than the president. Because if you cast your mind back to when the first figures were touted,
yes,
it was actually that preparatory committee that raised concerns about that, that we don't know where this is coming from. It came from a representative of the government, which also took us by surprise. But even before then, when that preparatory committee of the legacy foundations were now talking about what's going to happen next, they again, I mean, even though they said this in private because they were hoping, they said, that things would still be resolved, they were taken by surprise by the president going ahead and announcing the eminent group, and certainly whether it wasn't intended or not, but giving the impression that the eminent group were now the people who were running with this thing,
yeah,
and people could read into that something that said this was about them, when in fact right from the start we should have made it abundantly clear that this was about the people and not a select group of South Africans who have now been tasked or called the eminent group. And they thought that the ball was dropped from the moment the president actually made the announcement. Whether that was intentional or not is, of course, another matter. You and I will be there over the next few days. Hopefully, we'll be able to clarify these issues for our viewers. Ziyanda Ngcobo, trying to make sense on the back, of course, of that letter that has been written by the Thabo Mbeki Foundation to the organizers, in particular, Mr. Makuku Mampuru, who is the executive director of NEDLEC, among the people who have been tasked with running with this process.